So I promised on my Twitter that I want to go over a little segment on just basically current state of Hearthstone and how things can be improved. May not be like this particular expansion. Like I'm not sure if like there's just already too much damage done this expansion, or maybe it's like they could do some nerfs maybe. But let's just talk about the current state of Hearthstone. So one of the big issues right now is that you want to grow the Hearthstone community, right? So if you want to grow the Hearthstone community, you need to make it accessible for new players to come in. And at this point, since I've been playing free-to-play decks for like a year and a half now, a year and a half ago, the golden age or the peak of free-to-play was that free-to-play OTK Warrior, which was only common cards, only classic cards, didn't even use any adventures or expansions, and that could hit top 100 legend on 2 different servers. So that was definitely like the highlight, and I know it will never like get back to that point. I don't expect it to, because if it's that point, then Blizzard makes no money at all, right? Because nobody needs to buy any adventures, nobody needs to buy expansions. So yes, obviously that is not good for the game, but it should not be the other extreme either, where essentially all the cheap decks that people used to play, so like Zoo, and it's evolved over time. Like what are the cheap good decks? Like Combo Druid was one of those things, like the Force of Nature Savage Roar. That was like the only expensive part of that combo deck. And then what else was it's like evolved. Like mid-range Shaman was fairly affordable for everyone to make. Mid-range Paladin back in the day. Essentially a lot of the mid-range decks, Hunter, Face Hunter, although people didn't love it, it was just like you have different classes and there's like budget versions for every class. And of course there can be expensive versions, like you can play Handlock. Handlock's very expensive. You can play Zoo, and Zoo is a cheaper one. We need to have a stage like that, like Mech Mage. Mech Mage was a cheap one. You could play Freeze Mage, that's a little bit more expensive. Just having a variety of decks that are both cheap and expensive, and that's the way you balance it out. Like you can make money. People want to play the expensive, flashy decks, but then there's cheap decks for people to get into the game. And that's one of the disappointing things right now, is that if you look at the dust costs for most of the decks, there are usually like 3K, 4K, and then you see the top performing meta decks at like 8K to 10K or even more, right? So that's just like not accessible to new players, and I feel like they're not willing to nerf those decks because it's making them money right now. But they need to think about, if they want to keep making money, you gotta keep getting new players in, right? And you're not gonna get new players in because like a lot of people, they'll be probably hesitant to just say, all right, I'm gonna drop $200 on this game. Like I'm gonna start this game now, I'm gonna drop $200 and then go. So if you drop $200, you can probably craft, quite a few of the meta decks, and then you can learn how to play. But what would make you want to drop $200 just like cold without trying out the game first? You probably just like try out a couple months. Let me see how it goes, and let me decide if I want to play this game. So a new guy comes in, they start playing the game, and probably close to like, as I'm grinding right now, like even rank 15, you do get to face some Razakat's Priests and some like the Cube Warlock. And you start facing that, and then what is your impression of the game? Your impression of the game is probably like, wow, this is totally a pay-to-win game, and unless you pay lots of money into it, you're not going to do well. What kind of incentive does that give to a player to continue to play the game or also invest in the game, right? Unless they're rich, then they just drop all the money, but if you're just an average casual player, maybe you're not actually interested to drop more than like $50 in the game. And then it's pretty interesting in the community, because I get a lot of responses from ranging from like commentators or like big streamers all the way to just the average players. And they all agree that actually I had to spend more money on this expansion than I used to. Like maybe they used to just buy the pre-order, they buy the 50 packs, they spend $50, get the 50 packs, and they get enough, with a saving of gold that they can get by and play all the decks they want to. But then a lot of people find that they have to buy more packs than 50 just to play the meta decks. So I just want them to be honest and just keep an eye on this. Like, somebody needs to keep track of the statistics and just know, actually, the dust cost has been rising. Okay, yes, they are doing some payouts. They're trying to balance it a little bit out. Like, we give you a free Death Knight, or we give you a free weapon. And it's just like if you get lucky or not. Because actually, a lot of the weapons are crap. A lot of the Death Knights are crap. A lot of the quests were crap. You know, so they give you a free thing, but more likely you get something that's crappy. So then it doesn't actually help you craft the meta decks. And then another thing is that since they start doing like 2 legendaries per class, like a quest, it used to be like a quest in legendary, or a weapon in a legendary, or a death in a legendary. There's not a lot of crossover. You have to, like, once you invest in a deck, you're kind of stuck with it because you don't have enough dust to craft anything else. It's not like you could craft Dr. Boom, Ragnaros, Sylvanas, Cairn, things that use in multiple decks. Then there's like crossover with dust. Actually, I'm not sure how to keep track of that. Like, maybe there's a statistic to keep track of common dust that's like, like Keleseth. Maybe Keleseth is equivalent to that, where Keleseth is in a lot of decks. But I can't think of another, or patches. Okay, Keleseth and patches. Those are probably the 2 safe legendary crafts you can make right now that go in lots of decks. But otherwise, it's pretty specific to every deck. Okay, so there's that. Sorry if the rant is not like super coherent. Another point I want to address is this whole concept. You know, they're very hypocritical, because when they tell me things like, we nerf charge because it's not fun to take 30 damage in 1 turn. And it's not fun to lose. It's not fun and interactive, okay? They're like, fine. If you want to take that stance that OTK is bad, then stick with it. But then they make things like Rosaka's Priest, which is basically an OTK deck. They try to kill you. Valen, Mind Blast, Smite, and just the hero powers. It kills you in 1 turn. They make Quest Mage. Quest Mage is to OTK you. They make a Death Knight Paladin that can also OTK you, right? So how is that in line? You know, you'll notice it's actually because all these decks are really expensive. Okay, so the thing is like, we're not against OTK decks as long as you pay the money. As long as you pay the money, fine. We're fine with OTK decks. All right. Another thing is nerfs. Okay, they already know it's not fun. Like they nerf Innervate, because they say it's not fun if you turn 1 innervate something big out, because players can't deal with it yet, right? So they know in their mind, we can't make stuff big come out too early. Okay, anything with mana manipulation, like prep, I'm actually surprised that hasn't been touched. Like prep is a little bit like that. It's a mana manipulation. But then they make big decks, like big priest, big druid, cube warlock. It's a big deck. Basically, the whole point of those decks is to cheat out a 9-drop, a 10-drop, 8-drop on turn 5 or 6. Like that design is just totally hypocritical, right? Spiteful Summoner, that's another one. And what's even worse is a lot of these are just like high roll, because it basically like, did you get Barnes on turn 4 as a priest? If you get Barnes on turn 4 as priest, like what are you even supposed to do against that? And they keep supplementing this kind of deck. So it's obviously they want to make a big priest, because they make Eternal Servitude. Like the whole concept of that card is to high roll your opponent. And if you draw the right cards, like what can you do? Most even the meta decks, most meta decks can't have a good answer to it. Like maybe the Quest Mage has a good answer, but most of the meta decks don't even have an answer, let alone free-to-play decks. Free-to-play decks, well, what are you going to do? Silence that 1/1, turn it into 8/8. So some of those things are just really bad. And unfortunately, because Blizzard gave them enough weapons or enough tools to be consistent, the consistency is too high. Okay, and I remember asking Kibler this. Like Kibler, he's very experienced in game design. He's a very veteran player. He knows a lot about card games and like game design. And I asked him, I was like, at the time when Big Priest was played, even before this expansion, like it was already good enough to be played. I asked him, I was like, do you think Big Priest deck is good for the game? And he said like, no. Like Big Priest decks, like who thinks it's fun? And then the thing is like it's too consistent. Like he said, if it was like maybe it works 10% of the time, fine. It's like Astral Communion Druid. But if it works like 30%, 40% of the time, where you get your big stuff, that's too much. It's not fun. It turns the game into did I draw this? Did he draw that? Instead of okay, I'm making decisions and the outcome is because of my decisions. So if they really want to nerf stuff, I think there's too many things to nerf. Like Rizaka's Priest, they have to nerf something. Cube Warlock, they probably have to nerf something. Big Priest, they probably have to nerf something. I think there's just too many cards to nerf. So I don't, at this point, I think it's just like too late. We just have to live with it right now. But I just hope in the future when they design, they try to do less high roll type of concepts. I can understand that they, maybe one thing they're trying to promote is deck building. Okay, they think deck building is, and I think that's a fun part of Hearthstone. But this expansion, they push a little bit too much. Like all the big decks, it's actually very interesting from a deck building perspective. How do I abuse the card synergies to the extreme and make a deck that's like very powerful with those synergies? But was deck building really like that important of aspect to like destroy your gameplay part? Because the gameplay part is what most people do. The deck building part is probably most people are just net decking. They're not even deck building themselves. It's just like somebody comes with a deck and they're just net decking. So the gameplay part is actually more important than the deck building part. But unfortunately, it seems like they emphasize the deck building part too much in this expansion. So yeah, in the future, I hope that they will give mid-range decks a little bit more of a push, because mid-range decks have always been pretty fair decks, I would say. They're not trying to cheat out cards or be super face, because like people don't really like face decks either. They think it's too cheap, and they're like not very strategic. It's just like going face all the time. So most people don't like face decks, but then not everyone can afford these control decks, especially if they're like super broken. So I really like the mid-range style, and hopefully they can promote that a little bit more in the future. So that's my thoughts on the current state of Hearthstone. I guess I'll read over some of the chat before I go on with the goals for this year. The fact that they released another Priest AoE card is insane. Yeah, there's like the Dragon one, there's the Psychic Scream. Like, why buff one of the already best decks in the game? Right? Yeah, Rakato Beep says, like, compared to other games, say PUBG, CSGO, where people can spend $50 and get their money's worth. That's one other thing, too. Like, think about, actually, how expensive is this game where you're dropping, like, $150 a year. Okay, let's say, like, 3 expansions, you buy the pre-order. That's at least $150. And that $150, what does that buy you? Maybe, like, a quarter, a third of the game. Like, you're not even getting the full game. So just to be clear, it's pretty expensive. And so if you're gonna pay that much in the game, I think everyone should be a bit angry. Like, I'm not asking for handouts, and I know people who've invested a lot of time and money into this game are probably also against, like, oh, Blizzard just handing out free cards to everybody. And sure, let's fix it that way. Okay, I'm not advocating for handouts, but those people should also realize if the game dies, all their money that they invested in it has, like, it's gone. It's wasted, right? So it's actually in your best interest to, like, keep this game accessible for new players. Although maybe you think, like, making things cheaper or more affordable is kind of hurting you in terms of, like, your eliteness, the worth of your collection. But like, I hope you understand, like, in the long run, it's actually better if we keep the community growing and, like, welcoming to new players. Sorry, I'm not gonna be able to read everything one by one because I want to get on with goals for this year. So, in terms of the new format for the World Championships and how points are, I do like the direction that's going. It's got more support for teams. They're paying out money to teams, so it's encouraging more teams to get involved in Hearthstone. And I think that's actually important because one of the issues, having spoken to some team managers, is that teams actually don't make money sending players to tournaments because one is they're not getting enough exposure to justify even sending a player to a tournament. It's also with the amount of variance and the RNG involved, is actually pretty hard to consistently win these tournaments unless you're Pavel. And then another aspect is exposure. So even if you get exposure time, it may not directly lead to money. Like your stream may not actually grow. And it's actually interesting. Like you see people like Asmodai. Asmodai is one of those players. He hits rank 1 legend so often. Like pretty much every season, at least at some point, he's hitting rank 1 legend, if not finishing rank 1 legend. But to him, it doesn't make financial sense to even go to tournaments because if he goes to a tournament, he's not streaming for a week or 2 weeks. He loses so many subs that it actually hurts him more to go to a tournament than it is to just keep streaming. So I'm glad they tried to support the teams and maybe make some incentives. Like there's payouts if you even just show up at tournaments. So hopefully that'll support streamers like that to go attend the tournaments and to do well. I also like that they de-emphasized a little bit the open cups and the grinding every season because I think it was too much. It basically made it impossible for people like me who are not full-time to Hearthstone to qualify. Back when it was top 128, there was still a reasonable chance, but now that's top 64 and that you basically have to grind open cups, and open cups are often during the weekdays and you have to spend a whole day to grind an open cup to get those open cup points. It's just impossible. You basically have to be a full-time Hearthstone player. Which I'm not upset that most of the spots should go to those kind of players, but at least there should be some spots available for other players like me. So getting to my goal then, for January, at least I want to try it out, is to get some ladder finish for January and see how that goes. Although it's hard, I guess it is possible if you finish top 25 for all 3 seasons and you don't even have to do these tournaments. But of course, if it's a tournament that's local, I would like to attend that as well. So I do want to try to make a push for a competitive scene, and that's why you saw me for this stream playing a more expensive deck. It's something that's still off meta, which I like. And I think I've always liked Miracle Rogue. It's always had a spot in my heart. But then as far as streaming goes, I do want to keep up at least what I've done in the last few months is doing a weekly stream. But I would like to actually do more, but maybe shorter streams, just micro streams, because I do have to fit into my work schedule and then take care of other things in life too. So as part of my New Year's resolution, I'm still trying to exercise and keep up with all the other things that I want to do. But of course, Hearthstone has been fun to me, and that's why I made the rant, or just, I don't know, my opinion on the current state of Hearthstone. Not because not because I'm just trying to complain for no reason. I actually want to make this game better, and I want this game to survive because I enjoy it. I've also invested a lot of time in it, and I think a lot of people can enjoy it. But we need to really watch out. It's in a very dangerous spot right now to die, and so I hope that Blizzard is just aware of it. Let's not be blind to the facts. And if all they care about is to make money in the short term and not care about the long term of the game, fine, that's their decision. But they should know the consequences and be aware of what they're doing, right? So that's my opinion. It's don't pretend. Stop being hypocritical. Don't pretend you care about certain things when you don't. But I hope they can look in the long run, because to make more money and to keep making money, you gotta keep the players happy and to come back, and also for the new players to stay. So you better take that into account rather than like, all right, let's just forget it. The game's gonna die. Let's just milk the money, as much money as we can right now. Screw over the players. I think in the long run, you make less money that way than if you just kept people happy. All right, let me address some of the questions. Do you still maintain your accounts across 3 servers? Yeah, that's one of the hard things, Henny Graith, is that I still basically do my daily quests on every server. So far it's been okay, but like if I want to grind competitively, then I probably should just focus on one server. There is a question of which server do you focus on. I think everyone agrees that EU server is the hardest. It has right now has the most players. It used to be Asia has the most players, but like China has their own server. So EU is definitely most competitive to try to get like top 100 finish, and then NA, and then Asia. So there is some argument that since I have collection on all 3 servers, that maybe I should just grind on Asia instead. But typically I like to keep Asia as my free to play, like I'm playing budget decks, and then I grind harder on NA. I did mention about making a separate ladder where players can play pre-built decks. It might just be like Brawl. I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be popular enough to justify making it a separate mode. How was your New Year's Eve? My New Year's Eve and Christmas were pretty good. I was spending time with family on New Year's Eve. Nothing too special, but it was definitely good to be at home. Probably just focus on 2 servers for a competitive ladder, usually your home server and Asia. Yeah, that sounds like a good one. Asian servers have so many legendary people. I saw Eloise once with 30k legend, but Eloise is from China. Eloise plays on China server, and yes, that can probably get to 30k, 40k. I wouldn't be surprised. I'll be surprised if it actually hits 100k, but yeah, that's China server. They separated Asia and China, so actually none of us can access like China server. All right, I hope it wasn't too choppy during that segment. I'll be sad because I want to clip that for YouTube, but let's finish off with a little bit of free to play, because I know there's some demand for that, and some people do watch the stream for free to play. So I'm gonna hop onto Asia.